Welcome! In this video, I'll introduce the process that I use when crafting prompts. Prompt engineering is a mix of art and science. You'll hear me say this a lot because there's no one-size-fits-all approach for crafting prompts. The process that I'm going to share summarizes how I currently approach crafting prompts. I'm constantly refining my process as I learn more about generative AI models and services, and I recommend that you do the same. Distill what you can from my experiences, and then experiment to find out what works best for you. There are two considerations that I take into account when crafting prompts. First, what are the objectives for the prompt? Second, how will I verify that those objectives are being met? I think about prompts in the same way that I think about code. I write code to achieve a specific outcome, and I use automated tests to verify that the code is producing the desired outcome. Prompts are similar. Having clear objectives and a way to verify that those objectives are being met is critical to crafting effective prompts. Start by clearly defining the objectives. For example, am I trying to produce a specific response? Do I require responses to be formatted in specific ways, such as JSON or Markdown? Defining the objectives can be easier said than done. Some use cases are fairly straightforward, and others may have only vague objectives. Attempting to produce an image of an orange cat is fairly straightforward. Attempting to emulate human emotion is both more complex and vague. It's important to be flexible when defining the objectives. Every part of the prompt engineering process is an iterative process, including the objectives. Objectives can change for a variety of reasons. You may discover that the desired outcome isn't possible or practical. You may find that the objectives need to be more or less specific. You may also find that the objectives are attempting to accomplish something that's too complex for one prompt alone. Regardless of the reason, it's important to be flexible and iterate on the objectives as needed. Knowing the objectives is only half the equation. The other half is knowing how to verify that the objectives are being met. This could be as simple as having a human with sufficient expertise reviewing responses. It could also be more complex, such as some form of automated testing. Inside the scope of automated testing, there are a variety of approaches. Testing could be as simple as comparing responses against a list of expected responses. It could also be more complex, such as using a generative AI model to evaluate the response. My advice is to start simple and iterate. Don't overinvest in the objectives or verification process. Allow them to evolve as you progress. Once I have clear objectives and a way to verify the objectives are being met, I start by selecting a model that I think will produce the desired response. This is a highly subjective process that could differ on any given day. Commonly, I'll end up trying multiple models before finding the one that most consistently produces the desired outcome. I tend to start with a model that strikes a balance between accuracy and cost. For example, the GPT 3.5 Turbo model from OpenAI is a good starting point. It's a general-purpose language model that's fairly accurate and relatively inexpensive. The overarching goal is to find the model and prompt that most consistently produce the desired outcome. My first prompt is usually fairly verbose and clunky. It's more of a stream of consciousness than a well-crafted prompt. I don't worry about making the prompt more concise or elegant at this point. I focus on how the intent of the prompt influences the response. This process continues until I'm able to consistently produce the desired response. Now, this can take a while and it can be frustrating. However, it's important to remember that this is all part of the process. Certain use cases require experimentation with both prompts and parameters. For example, if you're trying to generate very fixed responses, you may find that lowering the temperature parameter produces more consistent results. If you're trying to generate responses that appear more creative, you may find that increasing the temperature parameter produces the better results. This can be a bit of a balancing act that continues throughout the process. Once I'm able to consistently produce the desired outcome, I invest time into better understanding how the prompt influences the response. I make predictions about how certain changes might break the response, then I test those predictions. For example, if I remove what I believe to be a load-bearing word, does the response change in the way that I expect? The term load-bearing indicates here that the word is critical to the response. Once I think that I fully understand how the prompt influences the response, I attempt to produce the same results using different prompts. This helps me to see how well I actually understand the connection between the prompt and response. I find these experiments to be extremely valuable, especially if I'm able to produce the desired response on the first try. I'm always more skeptical when the initial prompt appears to produce accurate responses. This is because I didn't get the opportunity to see how the prompt influences the response. I only get to see the results. Armed with a better understanding of how the prompt influences the response, I start refining the prompt. I remove any unnecessary words and rephrase the prompt to be more concise without losing response accuracy. I repeat this process until I've reduced the prompt to its most minimal essence. Some models will surprise you by how minimal you can make the prompt and still get the desired response. Some will surprise you how one seemingly insignificant word can throw off the entire response. Once I've refined the prompt, I start experimenting with different models. I compare the results of different models and try and understand where they differ. As long as the results are reasonably similar, I don't invest a lot of time into this process unless a use case requires it. If the results are significantly different, I'll invest more time into understanding why. This could boil down to a difference in the model's capabilities, default parameters, the model itself, or any number of other reasons. At this point, I have a prompt that consistently produces the desired response for one or more models. I recommend documenting which models and parameters have been tested. This can save a lot of time and frustration when you revisit the prompt in the future. Similar to revisiting code, it's helpful to have a record of what you've tried and why. Even a week later, it can be difficult to remember why you made certain decisions. This introduction intentionally glosses over a lot of the details in favor of a high-level overview. Other videos will go into more detail. However, with this introduction, you should have a better understanding of how you might approach crafting prompts. Okay, this seems like a good stopping point. That's all for this video. Thanks for watching.